Our next guest on The Informer is an old friend. His name is Jason Dasey. We first met during 1985 when we were both working at SBS in Sydney. And since then, is there anything you haven't done, Jason? You've done the property show currently on Property TV. You're still a correspondent for Money FM in Singapore. You're still doing stuff for ESPN. You're a digital reporter for the ABC. You're a gun for hire, an MC for hire. Is there anything you and I haven't seen one another do? I mean, it's just crazy stuff. I've got to mention a number of firsts. You were the first Aussie sports presenter on BBC News way back when I was a young man, 1994. Can you remember that far back? In 1999, you were working with CNN. Mate, you've lived abroad for the better part of the last quarter century, but something has brought you home. What's brought you home, mate?
George, I missed people like you. I missed working with Aussies. I missed my country. You know, I felt that I did everything I could overseas. And, you know, it's like you just feel you want to get back amongst, your own stock. And I have a daughter and I wanted to give her an Aussie education, the kind of education that I had. And, even though I'm from Sydney and we met, as you mentioned, in Sydney in 1985 when we were both working at SBS, we chose Brisbane because I like warm weather. I was in Singapore for 20 years and Brisbane agrees with us. And we've been back almost a year. And as you mentioned, in this crazy media world, George, you've got to do a lot of things to make a living. And fortunately, you and I have done a lot of things over the years. So whenever there's an opportunity, we can turn our hand to it. So very grateful to be home and very grateful to be on the show today. Thanks for inviting me.
My absolute pleasure. Tell me something. One of the things that you have been most comfortable with over the years is covering American politics. Have you ever seen a more chaotic time in American politics than now?
George, if they came up with a film, what we've seen over the last 3.5 years with Donald Trump, say 10 years ago, no one would have believed it. It's just out of this world. You know, every day there's something new. And the craziness is the new norm. And, as you know, I worked at CNN, for 3 years, and I worked for local TV over in the U.S. as well in the pre-9/11 days. And so when we look at the U.S. now compared to before 9/11, what a change. It's less than 20 years. And sadly, we're seeing the U.S. really not becoming the world power anymore for many, many reasons. And of course, the coronavirus with the deaths going over 100,000, over the last 24 hours or so, it really is terribly scary, George. And again, that's a good reason to be in Australia. It's definitely done so well throughout the coronavirus pandemic. But what's going to happen next?
You're 100% right. The so-called USA, the last thing it is the United States of America. They seem to be fighting with one another almost on a daily fashion. All right, let's talk about one of those other topics that you know so very well, Asian affairs. We've watched this giant called China grow and grow and grow over the last quarter of a century. What do you make of this current saber-rattling between the United States and China?
Well, look, as you know, George, I have a Chinese wife. She's from Hong Kong. My daughter was born in Hong Kong. I spent about a year in Hong Kong as part of my Asian odyssey, and I'm genuinely worried. I'm worried about what's going to happen in Hong Kong with Mike Pompeo, the U.S. Secretary of State, saying it doesn't look like there are two systems anymore between Hong Kong and China.
That was the slogan, wasn't it? Two systems, one country.
Exactly. In 1997, when China was handed back, when Hong Kong was handed back to China, it doesn't seem that long ago, but we're already 23 years in. And look, I travel regularly to Hong Kong and I see my relatives there. They are genuinely concerned about what's going to happen next. The shopping centers that we visit are kind of chaos. You've seen the pictures on TV. So we're very concerned. And of course, it's going to affect us here in Australia as well, isn't it? Because of the barley and all the trade that's going to be affected. We need to really make our own stand here. We can't keep following the US blindly like a lapdog. I think it's a big opportunity here for Australia if we carve our own path and if we're smart with China and really know that this is our rice bowl, as we say in Asian culture. China is Australia's rice bowl. We're not going to make compromises on human rights or anything else, but we don't need to blindly follow the US. And look, I'm sure that China would love to see Donald Trump out of power come January next year. The election's coming up in November. So we've got to think longer term rather than just trying to appease the US at the moment.
Let's talk about some of the other things that are supposedly keeping us up at night, and that is whether or not elite sport as we knew it is ever going to come back. Did you ever imagine we would see the disruption to the EPL, to La Liga, to Serie A, to the MLS, to the NBA, one of the biggest sports in the world? Did you ever think that, hey, they would suspend it and there'd be nothing there?
Never would imagine it, George. I know you're a big Tottenham Hotspur fan, and I've done a lot of Premier League hosting across Asia. I hosted the Premier League for 4 seasons. I did, many FA Cup finals on site, and that was really the boom period for sports. I was working for Astro in Malaysia. It was when pay television in Asia. I worked for ESPN Star as well. There was massive money being spent on Premier League, on NBA, on other big events as well. Those days, George, are going to change because there's not going to be the kind of commercial impetus in major sports because of this pandemic, sadly. So we're going to see the cost of sports rights coming down. We're going to see probably people assessing whether they want to go to major events overseas again. It's going to completely change the way we follow sport, both at the ground, at the stadium, and also on television. So a lot of sports, both here in Australia and internationally, are taking a massive hit. And yes, we are seeing rugby league back and AFL coming back soon, and hopefully the A-League as well. But these are very strange times, George, and worrying times for elite sportsmen and women.
Now, it seems to me that the deals that we saw in the past, with billions of dollars passed over to sporting codes to create these competitions and this television time, that's not going to be the case going forward. What we might see is our new players like Amazon, like Netflix, like Facebook. Can you see them being the new bidders for sporting coverage in the future?
Definitely, George, but they're going to, the sporting bodies, they're going to have to drop their rates dramatically. They're going to have to take a massive hit because when you do take things OTT, over the top, into streaming, you can't command the same kind of money that you are when you're going free to air, of course, because of the eyeballs, or even in the boom of pay TV. But pay TV, as we've seen, today we had all those reductions of newspapers going digital for News Corp. But before that, News Corp had taken a big hit with their Foxtel subscriptions.
Correct.
And this is a trend all over the world. I worked with ESPN Star in Singapore and then with Astro in Malaysia. And I remember my boss at Astro's getting the rights for 3 years for Premier League, and he says, there's no way in the world I'm going to get my money back, but I have to get it. Let's look at the game that we both love, football.
Yep.
That's on very shaky ground at the moment. We both love the A-League. We both love the Socceroos, and we're fans of different clubs in the A-League. But how can football survive this? With Fox, showing its reluctance to keep supporting football, even though there's another 3 or so years left on their contract.
Yep.
There needs to be a second division. Every major league in the world, I've hosted major sports events as far as emceeing the Asian Football Awards and all that as well. Korea, Japan, they all have these other divisions. It's got to happen in Australia as well, but again, money is a major issue for football.
And we need fans. And we need fans. At the moment, that's the one thing that the governments are telling us and the sporting bodies are telling us. We can't have fans at our sport, which is a real problem. Jason Dasey, let's do this again soon. Once again, welcome back to Australia. And I trust, mate, we get a chance to see you in the flesh very shortly as well.
I hope so, George. I remember the last time we met was in Melbourne before that Thailand-Australia World Cup qualifier, about, I think, end of 2017. And that was fun.
It was a night of victory, so let's hope we can do it again.
Yeah, thank you, mate.
All the best.
Catch you soon.
Go on, all the best. Jason Dasey on The Informer.